Let's take a step back to World War I. I know that there are a lot of history buffs out there, but how many of you knew that the Maine National Guard was involved in World War I? And I'm not talking about a minor involvement either. I'm talking about frontline missions, fighting side by side with the US allies. Imagine yourself traversing the landscapes of France and stumbling across a cavern that cuts deep into the French earth, only to find that inside those caverns once housed American troops from enemy artillery. Imagine yourself turning your flashlight on and exploring that cavern and finding multiple cave painting type murals that were created by the soldiers in World War I. Now imagine studying one of these only to find that it was created by somebody who was from South Brewer, Maine. That's pretty cool, right? On this 28th episode of the MAINEiac radio show, we've invited Captain Bratten, who is the Maine National Guard historian, to come by and share that experience with us. He was invited by the Smithsonian Channel to France to help film a documentary on the soldiers who lived in those caverns during World War I. He's going to share his experience, he's going to give us all of the details, and we're going to squeeze every last bit of information that we can out of him, because this is an awesome and unique opportunity that one of our Army counterparts was able to experience. We're going to skip a MAINEiac fact in this episode, as our MAINEiac fact ties into our interview with Captain Bratten. Oh no. Please don't cry. John, everything is going to be all right. I'm just going to shut the door real quick. Okay. I'm Tech Sergeant Andy Sinclair with the 101st Public Affairs Office here in Bangor. We've got a few more things to get to, including a retirement announcement and some other tidbits that you should know about. Master Sergeant Heather Johnson has some good information that she wants to pass on to you, so I've got a recording of that as well. Make sure the information you hear gets passed on to your coworkers. That is our overall goal with this podcast, after all, to disseminate information to keep you well informed. So with that being said, I'm going to play the tape that has the recording with Master Sergeant Johnson. Make sure you listen to what she has to say.
My name is Heather Johnson. I'm here to talk about the Drug Demand Reduction Program. So the program is here so that we can enhance the mission readiness and foster a drug-free environment for our members here. Also with that, it deters military members from using illegal substances or abusing any type of controlled substance. As well as a deterrence program, we end up detecting at some times or identifying those individuals who may be using or abusing illegal substances. And then it's also available to provide a basis for action against a service member who tests positive for an illegal drug use. I'd like to take a moment and talk about the medical review officer process. So anytime a service member comes up positive for what I like to call a potential prescription medication positive, our medical review officers, who are located down in the clinic, building 423, are responsible for reviewing the member's medical file, any dental records, any prescription drugs, any pharmacy documentation, to try to determine if that positive result does coincide with the medical documentation that's there. So it's really, really important that the service member keeps their medical documents up to date down in the clinic. Anytime a member is on a prescription medication that they're required to take all the time, it's good to have at least a 1-year subscription or prescription documentation down at the clinic, so that when a person potentially comes up positive for whatever it is they may be taking, the medical review officer has those documents in hand in their file, and they can make that determination right then and there. If the documentation is not up to date or is missing from the service member's medical file, that's when the commander gets involved. The commander will meet with the service member. They're given 30 days to bring forth any type of medical documentation that may deem necessary to try to close out that case. Make the program easier would be best if the service member does keep their documents up to date in their file. The members can bring forth any documentation over a drill weekend and drop that off in the main office. I believe the clinic also allows you to fax any documentation that you have, or you can mail it in. But basically having the service member, walk it in is fine over a drill weekend. If they had some form of medical procedure, during the month, if they're traditional, and had a wisdom tooth pulled and were prescribed a certain medication for pain, just remember to bring that documentation in and have it in their file just in case, they're selected randomly for the urinalysis program. They have their documents there for the MRO to review if they come up positive for that particular substance. So I also wanted to talk a little bit today about the Takeaway program, which is a program that the Department of Defense initiated in terms of making sure we take care of any unused or unwanted medical prescriptions. So we don't have them lying around, or they're not disposed of in a non-safe way. So there's takeaway bags down in the clinic, building 423, as soon as you walk in the front door. The goal of the program is a service member takes one of those bags, puts their unwanted or unused medication inside of that bag, seals it, takes it down to the United States Postal Service, drops it off, and it's shipped away and destroyed free of charge to the service member. I'm available if anyone has any questions. I've been doing the program a long time. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Sergeant Johnson, for that information. Again, make sure you pass that on to your coworkers and the fellow airmen that you work with, because knowledge is power. Did that sound like a PBS commercial or what? But it works. Knowledge is power. Keep that in mind. So Chief Master Sergeant Mike Emery is retiring this weekend. He's had a long-standing history with the Maine National Guard. If you see him around, make sure you stop him and congratulate him. Congratulations, Chief. I hope retirement brings you more time with your family and more time with that boat of yours. Also, congratulations to Master Sergeant Eric Cole. Sergeant Cole was just recently promoted to Master Sergeant, so if you see him around, make sure you congratulate him. He is by far one of the hardest working NCOs I've ever seen. And as you all know, this extra stripe means extra responsibility. I have no doubt in my mind that Master Sergeant Cole will meet those responsibilities head on, so congratulations to you. Speaking of passing information on to your coworkers, Senior Master Sergeant MAINEiac over in the safety office recently sent out an email that could help you and those around you make sound decisions when you're out on the town. The wing developed a program a couple of years ago that allows MAINEiacs to get home safely if they've had too much to drink, with no charge to the airmen, and the steps being completely anonymous. There we go, anonymous. The steps being completely anonymous. You can get home safely by calling the command post, and they're going to set you up with a free ride home. The email that Senior Master Sergeant MAINEiac sent out recently is just one more way that you can remain safe and plan your night accordingly. In the email, he talks about different beers, different types of beers can affect you based on their alcohol content. Not all beers are created equal, especially if you're gauging a light beer to a microbrew. So your blood alcohol content may be able to handle 3 beers by a certain company when it can't handle 1 from another company, meaning that some beers will affect you differently, especially once you get behind that wheel. Take a look at the email, read what he has to say, pass that information on to those around you, and not just the people that you work with. Pass it on to your family and friends as well. It's a great guide, and it's a way to keep you safe, and could potentially be a roadblock from you making a poor decision and deciding to drive home after having too much. So give it a look, and please consider what he has to say carefully. That is all. It looks like Captain Bratten is here now, so let's bring him in and have him share his story. Okay, so with us today is Captain Bratten. He is the command historian for the Maine National Guard, both Army and Air. He's from JFHQ. He's here today to talk to us about an experience that he underwent where he was involved with a documentary that was aired on the Smithsonian Channel. Captain Bratten, thank you for coming in.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was awesome to be able to come up to the wing.
So we heard this story, and I honestly, I don't even remember who I originally heard it from. It may have been from Senior Duplain, but I can't remember. But so kind of walk me step by step on how you got involved with this whole process.
Sort of path to a documentary is kind of weird. I've been doing a lot of research on Maine in World War I, and I got a call one day from this writer. He's like, "Oh, I'm working on a documentary. We found some names in these like caverns in France. Do you have any idea about the unit? It's called the 103rd U.S. Infantry." I'm like, "Yeah, that's Maine's National Guard unit in World War I. What do you want to know about them?" And he goes, "Oh, well, I want to find out more information about what they did, and we've got these names. Can you look them up and find service records?" And so I started helping him out. And the process went on over a couple months, and then finally one day he calls. He's like, "Yeah, we're looking to actually go over to France to record this documentary. You wouldn't happen to have any interest in going, would you?" I'm like,
Well, yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
France. So yeah, I mean, sort of to make a long story short, it happened. It was literally just a cold call of somebody looking for information, and it turned into probably one of the most remarkable experiences of my career, easily, actually, the most remarkable.
So when you got over there, what were you actually doing?
So we got over there, and the general premise of this whole thing is that there are these caverns underground. They're old quarries, limestone quarries that have been quarried away since like the 1500s, so like the Middle Ages, and they go way, 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 way back underground. Like we were wandering around for like 8 or 9 kilometers at least, and during World War I, they're like purpose-built shelters because, of course, during World War I, the biggest problem is artillery, and thanks guys with the Air Force, aviation. The birth of aviation. So now you've got direct observation provided by airplanes coordinating artillery, and so anybody who's on the surface does not want to be there. It's a really inhospitable place. So these quarries, which are all over France, serve as these ready-made underground shelters, and they would build like underground cities, so fully electrically lit, with a underground like narrow gauge railroad servicing the whole thing. It's pretty amazing. And our main troops, so the 103rd U.S. Infantry, they get to France in 1917, and they go into the front lines in February of 1918, so just about 1 year ago, or I'm sorry, 100 years ago from now. And naturally, with Maine soldiers, as anybody who has ever seen a MAINEiac sticker placed pretty much everywhere you go on this planet, I mean, like, I can't think of a facility I've been to that hasn't had a MAINEiac sticker, and lots of civilian places that have them that
Probably shouldn't have stickers on them.
No, but it's amazing though. Like you go someplace, you're like, oh wow, MAINEiac has been here at some point. This is awesome. So they're underground and they're experiencing the front lines for the first time. Shelling and seeing airplanes, seeing air combat, being in combat themselves for the first times, and then they come away to the support position where they're underground. And whether it's like this mixture of boredom or a desire to leave a message behind, these guys start carving their names, their hometowns, their pictures of U.S. flags or U.S. insignia, like little mementos of either home or our national origin on the walls of these caves. And because it's underground where no weather really reaches it, they've been sitting there for 100 years virtually untouched. So imagine it's like completely pitch black out and you're walking, we're walking along and I'm like, man, if we get lost, this is how horror movies begin.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we got our little flashlights and we finally hit this light on the wall and there's this amazing shield, like this, it looks like the American flag with stars on top, and below it says Mechanic Ali Ardeen, South Brewer, Maine. And we're in the middle of France, and it's just absolutely insane. So we find all these things underground, and then the next task was really trying to identify. So who were these guys who left their mark underground? And so that was There was a really cool aspect of filming in France because it's France. Right. And also because we in the U.S. have really forgotten World War I. We don't think about it that much. We should. This is my my PSA right now. Think about World War I. Learn about it. Because it informs so much of the world today and what we do, especially in the Army and Air Guard. But in France, they have a much more immediate way of remembering it. So, I mean, they were occupied for 4 years. They were fighting. They had, millions of casualties of killed, wounded, and missing. Like by way of sort of illustrating how they remember it, we were filming, and we'd come out of the caves, and the caves are in this like farmer's field. So we came out sort of for some air and to eat lunch, take a break. And being a farmer's field, some other farmers saw us and they're like, what are all these vans doing? And they come over and like, I don't speak a word of French. I'm there with my counterpart from Massachusetts, National Guard Brigadier General Len Kondrachuk, and they see our uniforms and they just start talking really, really, really quickly in French. And we're like, what are they saying?
Something's about to go down.
Right. Yeah. Somebody, where's our interpreter?
Right.
And we asked the interpreter what they're saying. And they're like, well, they're thanking you for World War I and World War II.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
You're like, wow, yeah, this is a really heavy moment.
Right, right.
That wasn't me.
Yeah,
but you're welcome.
You didn't know.
Right. But it was really neat to show how the war really impacted them that much and how much they remembered our involvement. So that was really amazing, looking at like a legacy of service of 100 years of Maine Guard experience really just summed up in a few moments like that. And then the other aspect was tracing down family members. So I don't know how it is in the Air Guard, but in the Army Guard, like our service goes by family. So like people from the same family will continuously like serve through generations. And so like you could trace these guys who carved their names on the walls. Like they stayed in the Guard like after the war, and like some of them were in World War II in the Guard, and like you'd find newspaper articles and stuff. We managed to track down a bunch of family members still in Maine, some living outside Maine. So it's a really wild experience.
When you contacted those family members that are still in, were you a part of that process as well?
Yeah. The biggest one, we took a little bit of a chance because we found some carvings that had no names on them, but they looked like they were American Indian origin. So definitely like Native American headdress, a birch bark canoe, things like that. And they were like, well, were there any American Indians here? And I was like, let me take a look. And I'd done some research prior to, and I knew that there were Passamaquoddy who were serving in Company I out of the company out of Eastport. I was like, well, it might be worth a chance. So we took a trip up to Indian Township, and we sat down with their tribal historian, and they were looking at it and they're like, yep, this is definitely stuff that like it fits the pattern of the kind of carvings that have been done by the Passamaquoddy for hundreds and hundreds of years. So kind of fitting that piece together was pretty amazing, especially because to my knowledge, those are the only American Indian markings, like cave markings in Europe. So that in itself was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what were the reactions to that? I mean, you were obviously excited, but
yeah, they were very, very excited. We timed it to go with their I think their celebration for the veterans in their community. So they had a whole bunch of Passamaquoddy veterans up there. One of our own Maine Guardsmen was there. And one of the things we did, which was really emotional. Now, when the Passamaquoddy came back from World War I, they weren't American citizens, they weren't Maine citizens, so they didn't really get any recognition, which was highly unfortunate. And so I worked with the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services to get their family members of the Passamaquoddy who had been killed and wounded in action. There were 4 who were wounded and 2 had been killed in action, the Gold and Silver Stars for BVS. And then we had a ceremony to present that. So that was highly emotional for both the families to get closure, and then on my side to actually come face to face with like the children of some of these. I mean, the Passamaquoddy's, the tribal governor's son was actually killed in action on the last day, the last full day of the war, November 10th, 1918. So it was a really amazing contribution from the Passamaquoddy, a huge show of patriotism, and then that action that we were able to provide some type of closure. I know it doesn't go all the way, but in some sense it helps close the loop on that a little bit. Was pretty incredible, and also showing how diverse the service is from our state.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's not just another day in the office.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, like, what do you do? I go, well, most of my time is researching. It's in the office going over files, and occasionally I get to go out and do some really incredible stuff and meet amazing people and look at the legacy of service that's across this state, which is really remarkable for how small our state is to the amount of impact that our service members have going back, like I said, hundreds of years. We've got, on the Army side, we go back to like 1760 for our earliest unit. And then, I mean, even on the air side, our just like I said, the MAINEiacs, like everyone knows who the 101st Air Refueling Wing is. Like there's no secret about that in the Army, our Army and Air Force.
Was the whole documentary filmed in France at that particular location, or did they bounce around?
The cool thing was I got to see how a documentary is made from start to finish, and it really kind of messed with my head a little bit because there's a lot of acting that's involved, mainly because of how the sequence things are done.
Like the reenactments?
Well, there's reenactments, but it's also filmed out of sequence. So our first filming was done in France. That was in May, I think. So we did 5 days on the ground in France, filmed a bunch of stuff. And then we came back, and then the next month we filmed a segment in Massachusetts that was supposed to be like the preliminary. So we had to pretend that we hadn't been to France yet. And then we went up to, we did some filming in Augusta, and we did some filming up at Indian Township. But the sequence of it all was weird, especially the Massachusetts filming, to just like pretend we hadn't already been over to see everything that they were talking about. So
it's cool to sit back and hear all this, because you're talking about something that you wouldn't have been a part of unless you had joined the Maine National Guard to begin with. So it's one of those unique and cool stories that people don't normally hear about. That's really cool. So the fact that you got to experience that is awesome.
Yeah, the career field of Army or Air Force or all of the services have historians. It's definitely one of the hidden secrets. Whenever I talk at a school, I ask, are there any history majors? And I want to be a history major, and like one or two people will raise their hand. And so yeah, the National Guard's afforded me a huge opportunity to be able to work with amazing people, go incredible places. I have a all expenses paid trip to Afghanistan, so
that's pretty cool.
That was fun.
Nice warm place.
Right.
Last question. So what was your biggest takeaway in your whole experience?
Biggest takeaway, that one's tough, because I'm torn between the realization of how much World War I and specifically our involvement in World War I really impacts the French people and how grateful they are for it. And also my sort of discovering that the service of Mainers goes so far and so deep. Doing all the research on Mainers in World War I realized that looking at their careers, a lot of them after the war, they would go into politics or community leadership positions or Guard leadership positions. And those are all like our future leaders, like that led us through the World War II time period. So the governor of Maine during World War II was Sumner Sewell. He was a fighter ace from World War I.
That's pretty cool.
He shot down 4 or 5 enemy aircraft, 2 balloons, and then captured 1 plane on the ground, literally forced it down. And
was that all he did?
That's all he did. But can you imagine being the governor and like talking to the legislature and you're like, I'm an ace, come on.
No big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
I just flew around in like this plywood contraption with paper and machine guns on it.
The life expectancy was pretty low back then too.
Right. But like just discovering these amazing stories of service all across our state and in our Guard that I did not know about before. So I think that's my biggest takeaway that drives me to try to spread that story around the state as well and get people excited and interested about World War I and see how it really impacts our own lives today.
There's a term in the Air Force that we like to use. We call it rebluing. Maybe this whole situation was a re-greening experience, right?
Definitely, yeah.
I want to thank you again for coming in, taking your time to do this. I'm driving all the way from Augusta to do a 20-minute interview, but thanks again. Is there anything you had to add?
No, thanks for having me up here. Like I say, I like to come up to the wing and see all the cool aircraft, which are always confusing and awe-inspiring to Army people.
Well, thanks again, Captain.
Appreciate it.
That is all we have for this episode of the MAINEiac Radio Show. Hopefully that interview didn't go on for too long and lose your interest, but I thought it was pretty interesting. I want to thank Captain Bratten again for coming in and sharing his unique experience with all of us. Way to represent the Maine National Guard. A quick plug-in for this year's upcoming deployers. If you're a full-time technician and you have questions about anything deployment related, contact Sergeant Mishu down in personnel. She is the expert. Every time I talk to her, she has an answer, and if she doesn't have it immediately, she finds it out and she gets back to me almost immediately. She's great to work with and she's very knowledgeable. So if you have any questions, contact her. Speaking of deployments, let's take this time to thank everybody down in supply for all of the hard work they've been doing to get everybody ready who's heading out. We know it's not easy, and I think their job is one of those career fields, kind of like contracting, where there's a lot that goes on that we don't see. day where they're working overtime and they're putting in 110% to make sure their mission gets completed. So on behalf of everybody here, a huge thank you to the supply office. You guys are awesome. That's it. That's all the information that I have for this episode of the MAINEiac Radio Show. I'm your host, Tech Sergeant Andy Sinclair with the 101st Public Affairs Office here in Bangor. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. Thank you again to Captain Bratten for coming up. We've kind of been playing phone tag over the last couple of months to try and get him up here to talk about it. So we're very happy that we were able to finally pull the trigger and get him up here to share his story. As always, if you have ideas for the MAINEiac Radio Show, don't hold back. Shoot me an email or give me a call. Also, be sure to head over to our Facebook and Instagram pages by searching 101STARW. And be sure to check out the Vice Wing Commander's official Facebook and Instagram pages by searching CV.101ARW. Hope to see you all around this weekend. And remember, give hugs, not drugs. Don't drink and drive, and stay awesome. So long.